Hey all, welcome back in the car to my reality show, Driving with a Therapist. I think there's a reality show of getting coffee, something in a car with a comedian. But if you think about it, I mean, some of my most powerful conversations as a kid was driving with my mom to various appointments. She doesn't remember it so positively, but I mean, she thought that we argued a lot. But I remember them fondly. I mean, you have a captive audience. A car is a really powerful place to have a conversation. I think it would be worthwhile, like a new therapy, car therapy, driving therapy, you know, depending on how much you're struggling, that's how far you need to drive. But a lot can get accomplished in a car conversation. But talking about that, I want to address picking a therapist, choosing a therapist. It's so complicated, you know, as I work on my own marketing and getting known, and you see there's just all these websites listing so many names, pictures and names, and then an alphabet soup after therapist names, and who knows what they stand for and mean, and you've got to somehow pick a therapist and choose a therapist. I'd like to take a different angle instead of just talking about the cold process of picking someone, or what's the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and a therapist. Or what some of the alphabet soup means after people's names. I think the better way, my whole approach is empowering people to stand on their own 2 feet. So the better way then would be to help you understand more from a therapist perspective. What is therapy? What is it all about? And not just me as a therapist, I myself also have my own therapist, and I've been working with therapists on and off throughout my life and enjoyed it very much. If we can talk a bit about what the process is of therapy, what it's about, why it works, then you know that you're looking for someone to help you have that kind of an experience. So let's try to empower you a little bit. So what is therapy? It's a conversation. It's a relationship. It's an interesting relationship because it's not the typical two-way street that one hopes a relationship to be. And it's not that the client is taking care of the therapist or giving to the therapist. Although I can promise you that a good therapist is learning from the client. Will often see some of their own personal stuff in things that are brought up by the client, even if that's not what's mentioned in the session, because the purpose of the session is for a therapist to be completely present, thinking, contemplating, asking thoughtful questions, tuning into what a client is asking and discussing or talking about. Let's compare it to a typical friendship or relationship where we often spend a lot of time thinking about what we're going to say next and not so much about what the person is saying to us in that very moment. So therapy is this relationship, and in that way many of us are turning to therapy for challenges or difficulties in relationships. It'll turn out that issues with relationships, friends, intimate partners, parents, family, it has to do with us, ourselves. There's some part of me that is coming out in the struggles in the relationship. It could be the ways I see myself, it could be the ways I see others, interpret things, but the difficulty is coming out in relationships. If it's purely an issue with relationships, which it isn't, then it means it's out of my hands. I have to hope that other people will be nice to me and then I can have good relationships. But really what we're talking about is I myself, how am I moving through the world? How am I interacting with others? And that I very much have control over, and I can work on. I can make changes. And as we've spoken about with life patterns, there are ways that I was brainwashed, trained, learned, absorbed how to see myself, view myself, see the world, see others, to feel stable, secure, my sense of self, my confidence, my ability to express myself. All of these things we pick up deep messages as kids and carry with us. Oftentimes they help us like armor to get through childhood, and then by continuing to carry them with us, they interfere with our relationships. And so here I am in therapy having a relationship. I'm sharing, I'm talking, I'm communicating, and having a relationship. Now what's interesting is that there's a dynamic in that relationship that's not typically found by other relationships. There's something called process and content. There is what we talk about, the content, discussing an issue, a fight, struggle at work. So even with friends we have that, where we'll talk about a topic. But what we don't talk about typically is how we talk, how we communicate, the way in which the discussion is going on. most of us would have a whole lot of feedback to share and also need to hear as far as the way we're communicating with others. But in a typical conversation amongst colleagues, friends, we're not talking about the way that we talk, how it makes me feel when you're looking at your phone and I'm trying to share something. When you're speaking with a certain tone, how it impacts me. When you're not addressing certain things that I say and you're ignoring it. The way in which we go about communicating. So that's called process. The way in which we communicate is very important. It's very revealing. There's a lot that's there. But again, typically we don't discuss these things with people that are friends. We each have our own agendas that we're talking about. But a therapy relationship is one in which every aspect of the relationship can be discussed, not just the things that come up in a client's life and they're dealing with, but also the way in which it's being communicated. And the therapist can give the client feedback about that, and the client also can give the therapist feedback about that. They're in it together. It's a relationship they're having together. But that ability to have that relationship and to discuss that relationship is very powerful, because it's not like a person is someone completely different out in the real world, and then they come into therapy and they put on a mask and become something else. Although some people do it. And a sure way not to succeed in therapy would be, don't be open, don't be honest, pretend you're something that you're not, conceal some of the facts of what's been going on, only share what you want to share, and you can't expect a therapist to be a mind reader. But again, that therapy is about creating this relationship, and obviously there has to be trust. That one can share how they're really feeling about the therapist, or to be able to receive feedback from the therapist about ways in which they may be wrong, mistakes they may be making, or for them to be able to hear how their style of communicating might be received. Here the therapist is experiencing the client, the way they speak, the way that they're conducting themselves, which is likely ways in which the client is conducting themselves outside of the therapy session. And here the therapist can actually give feedback about that. And you can, if you're really interested in learning and growing, then there's some really valuable feedback, because there's this trust that's been created and developed. And I'm saying created, I'm saying developed, because it's a process. It's built up over time. If I'm regular communicating with you, I feel that you're tuning into me. You're focused on me and sharing with me openly and honestly. As a therapist, I can come to trust you. If I hear that your insight is effective, it's accurate, you're really hearing me, I can learn to build trust. That's huge. A lot of us have never had real trust in a relationship. We've been abandoned, we've been mistreated, we've had our trust taken advantage of. And so here we are having this relationship, getting feedback about the relationship, learning to feel trust in a relationship. Many of the things that we never got in earlier relationships in life, or things that we got and we really didn't want to have had. This relationship with a therapist is without that kind of stuff. So again, these are some of the things that are experienced, that are going on within the therapy sessions. And as you're looking to pick someone, it's helpful to have in mind that this is what I'm looking to create. You may call up an office. In a larger office, you'll speak to a secretary, make an appointment, and experience their process. Or most therapists that are working privately, you might even get they themselves on the phone. But everything is an opportunity to see how you feel. There's not that much to go on. You should have some questions that you want to ask. We can talk about what are some good questions to ask, or just you yourself, whatever's on your mind, and how is it received, how is it answered, how am I dealt with, because this is a person I'm going to be investing a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of vulnerability with. Do I feel it's possible to develop some trust? You may have a good sense and then go to a few sessions and start to feel opposite. Although I do encourage a person to really give it a chance, and if things are not working, use that as an opportunity to give feedback about it. These are a few ideas about what happens in therapy, why therapy works, what it's about. There's much more to talk about, but it's enough of a taste that I'm not just here to educate about what happens in therapy and why it works, just so that you know, but also with this idea of helping you choose and pick the right kind of therapist, the right person, as well as the right medium for that therapy, face-to-face and online. Okay, anyway, keep coming with comments, private comments or Facebook comments. I'm in touch with everybody, and we'll keep talking about this.